All right, let's move on to Antonia's question. What can the public do to end disappearances? That's how I wrote it. Now let me, that's how I put it in my notes, but let me read it word for word here from Antonia. Antonia said, I'm boggled by the amount of people that go missing every day, even though most eventually are found. What are some proactive steps we can take as a society to end disappearances? Now, from a public standpoint, so Antonia, when you're asking me about the public, people who haven't had disappearances happen in their family, the biggest thing I would say is the public needs to understand the facts regarding missing persons cases. I think that the public does not have an accurate view of disappearances. They know about them, certainly, but I think that they think that they're not as common as they are. Even the true missing persons cases where people end up being, missing for weeks, months, years, are not that common compared to all of the reports that are filled out. But I think the public perception, at least people who maybe don't listen to this program or other programs like it, or watch Disappeared or other programs, TV shows, the public, I think, believes they're a lot less than they even are. I think the public thinks that when they see a news story about a missing person and they see one this month and then like another one the next month, they think, oh, nobody else disappeared in that time, which of course we know isn't true. And, even though I've been doing this for over 3.5 years now, I'm not sure why some cases get a lot of attention and others don't. But because of that, because some do get a lot of attention and others don't, the public perception is that, well, when a disappearance happens, the public hears about it, and if they don't hear anything about a missing persons case, then none are going on. That's the first way to start lowering the number of disappearances that happen. The public has to have a more accurate idea of how common they are, even though statistically, compared to other types of crimes and things, they aren't common. But they're much more common than the public believes. That's my impression. The other thing I think the public thinks is that when they do hear about missing persons cases, that it just falls into a few categories. Children, old people with Alzheimer's, people with domestic violence, as Cherie is saying, and anybody, or drugs. Anybody who doesn't have those issues, if you're not a child, if you're not really, really old, if you're not in an abusive relationship, if you're not doing drugs, then I think the public thinks, well, you can't go missing. And that's not true either. Now, of course, as I've stated many times, relationships are the number one driver of missing persons cases. I don't think the public knows that. They may know that domestic violence can be a factor, but I don't think the public could ever guess that it's the number one factor. It's, in fact, you can go through all of Unfound's cases and see that in most instances, when you look at the missing persons cases that we've covered, the main suspects are, and we have good reason to believe, even though a lot of it's circumstantial, that boyfriend, that girlfriend, that husband, that ex-wife, whoever, is probably most responsible. But I don't think the public knows that, even though they probably could guess that, yes, men do make women go missing. So there's that. I think that the way we lower the number of people going missing is, from a public standpoint, once again, people who have never had a missing persons case happen in their family is that they need the right information. That's part of it. Let me just look at some of these things first of all. DQ says Kevin Wynn disappeared from Fort Wayne. DQs, if you want to send me or Emily any information on that, we'll certainly take a look at it. August, hello, how are you? Emily says, I try to make sure someone knows where I am, especially when I'm traveling, someone knows where I am. Yeah. And Emily, I know you do a lot of traveling between Texas and Arkansas. Carrie says, one of my speech assignments I did was over NamUs. My professor was astounded at the numbers I gave and the number of entries. Yeah. Kathy says, yes, my parents raised me to always be accountable wherever I was going. Carrie, several family members can track me in real time on Google Maps every 4 years because of my little traveling heart. August Ed, do you ever encounter prospective interviews who back out due to fear of repercussions from unsavory types or where we were associated with a missing loved one? Yes. Can't talk about who those people were, August, but that has happened. Yes. Yeah. Emily, when I travel back from my dad wants to know every time I get to a different city, if I don't answer in the amount of time he thinks I should, he blows my phone up. Cherie says, women make men disappear too. That's certainly true. And of course, the disappearance that I think of right away is one that we covered last summer, Jonathan Estes, is one that comes to mind. So you're right, Cherie. But, those are just a few things that I would say from a public standpoint, Antonia. Now, from a family standpoint, if there are people in your family who are going through some of those things, domestic violence, drugs, or if you think you have children in your family from a cousin or, there may be, abusive relationships and these things, then you need to keep an eye on them a little more than you would anybody else. You need to know that it can happen. It can happen anytime. And this is why the first thing I say, but this is what I think I know, is that if you have a missing person, if somebody goes missing in your family, the first thing you do, even before you call the police, even before you file a missing person report, you start writing down all the people that you think would have wanted to cause that person to go missing. I don't care if it's 2 people. I don't care if it's 10 people. You write them all down. And then you call the police. And you give the police the whoever takes the information. I have reason to believe one of these people could have caused my loved one to go missing, and you give the reasons, and you instruct the police to find out where their alibi was at the time your loved one went missing. It has to be done then, in those first 24 hours, because if you wait a week to do that, nobody ever can remember where they were. And if the suspects can create lies that can't be, sometimes can't be proven to be untrue. That is the first thing you do. Now, if it turns out that the person reappears, then everything is fine. Then everything's fine. But it's those first few minutes when you find out, you start writing names down. I don't care if the person was into drugs or not, they are in relationships or not. I don't care. The first thing you do is make a list of people and you try to figure out where those people were at the disappearance time. That's what you do. That's what I would say to families who have some of the things going on that I've already mentioned. But with the public, where I was going with that is the public doesn't realize that anybody can go missing at any time. And I think that with the rise of suicides, at least in the United States, and the rise of addiction to non illegal drugs like opioids that are illegal. They have to have prescriptions and a prescription abuse and all of that. That number of people who you wouldn't expect to go missing is going to continue to rise. Because of suicides, the suicide rate is way up in the United States over the last 50 years. The addiction rate is way up over the last 50 years. That contributes, those two facts contribute to missing persons cases, no doubt in my mind. So, and the other tough part about that is that many times, we have lots of friends and we don't know what's going on in their heads. We don't know what they're addicted to. They may seem fine on the outside. They got this great facade going on, but underneath, they're struggling with all sorts of things. They might be a meth head. You just don't know. So, that also, I think, contributes to the public not, completely understanding everything about missing persons cases. Emily says, we'd had people that wanted to be interviewed, but they didn't want to mention certain things or names. That's true. Emily also says, without saying certain things and certain names, there isn't anything to say except this person is missing. That's true too. Carrie say, I will preface that with, if it is a child or elderly, don't wait, call 911. You can write as you wait for law enforcement to arrive. Kids and elderly get themselves in heavy commits quick. Great advice. I hope it never great information. I was looking for more of educating the public perspective. Well, the public needs, like I said, the public needs educated, and I'm trying to do that. I'd like to think that people who have been listening to Unfound since day one are much more educated about disappearances than they were in 2016. Now, I don't know if, for listeners of other programs, they are getting the same type of education. But I think I'm doing my part. As with any education, Antonia, it's a two-way street. The person who is giving out the information has to want to teach it. And the person out there who is supposed to be taking it in has to be taking it in. So, it's just not as simple as telling people things. That you also have to convince them that it's important to know these things. And so I think that there are a lot of poor teachers out there, and frankly, there are a lot of poor students out there. But that I've told you what it's going to take. And I'm just trying to do it as well as I can, and trying to build the audience, and trying to educate people every time they tune into the program. This is not an entertainment show. This is a news show. This is an education show, if you want to call it a show program. This is an education program. It's an information program. It is not an entertainment program. Cherie says there has to be a balance, yes, between teachers and students. Antonia, absolutely. I've already learned so much since finding your podcast in November. Thanks for finding it. Carrie says you have to find a way to make that education interesting, pull them in fast and hold attention, or they will block it out. Yeah. I guess what I'm saying, Carrie, is my impression is that there's not a lot of not much of an attempt at education out there. It's just all entertainment based and not education based. There are obviously a lot of programs that are good from a standpoint of covering a disappearance, whether they're just reading off of Wikipedia or whatever. But what are you supposed to learn from that you can apply to all these other cases over here? And that's what I try to do. The building blocks of education. It's no different than you go from math to algebra to geometry to trigonometry to calculus to physics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I'm trying to do. I think that maybe a lot of other programs out there just want to stay at the math level. Well, let's go move on to Friday's disappearance. The disappearance of David Hardy Jr. from Alexandria, Louisiana on July 8th, 2017. The guest will be his daughter, Linda Freeman. And this episode is being entitled Frame of Mind. And the reason is because this is, I find it almost hard to believe, but it's true that this is going to be the first disappearance we've covered on Unfound where dementia and or Alzheimer's is a part of the disappearance. Now, we, of course, all know, being that I know we all look at true crime news and missing persons news, how many people with Alzheimer's or dementia go missing. They walk off or they're in a car. And it's just amazing. It took us about 170 disappearances to finally cover one of these kinds of disappearances. But that will be this Friday. David was diagnosed in approximately 2015 with Alzheimer's, the beginning stages. Although he continued to go to work 5 days a week, he had a job even at 78 years old. And yes, David will be the oldest missing person we've featured on Unfound. I think to this point it was, I know who number one was. Let me check it here. I don't want to get it wrong. But let me find it. Where is he? Hold on 1 second. The previous oldest person was Jack Hemby, missing from Rio Doce Downs in New Mexico in 2011. He was 76. David is 78. But he seemed to be doing okay, even though once in a while when he would go out, he would get lost, and the police would find him and bring him home. Well, that's what happened this time. That he had gone out to the store and didn't come back. Well, he was located like an hour and a half away. The police brought him home, left his car in Alexandria, brought him home, and then the next day, he and his son drove back to Alexandria to get his car, and the instructions were that David was supposed to follow his son back to Eunice, Louisiana, about an hour and a half away. As soon as they were getting out of Alexandria, they were on a highway. David took an exit that he shouldn't have. His son saw that it happened, tried to do a U-turn to find his father, could not find him. David disappeared. His car was later found in Elizabeth, Louisiana, which is nowhere near Alexandria, and the car, which was a Mustang, was out of gas. And a witness, it'll be up to you whether you want to believe this or not, a witness says that David Hardy was a black man, African American, but the witness says that a white man left the car where it was found. So that is the disappearance for this Friday. It's the disappearance of David Hardy Jr. His case is on Charlie Project. It is on NamUs. There's both a page and a group that I've linked to already on Facebook. Alexandria, Louisiana, July 8th, 2017. The name of the episode is Frame of Mind, and his daughter, Linda, will be the guest. She did a great job. Great interview with Linda. Like Linda a lot. And I know Emily was just talking about her earlier in the discussion. Linda is a very easy person to like. Really, really like her a lot. But that's it for today. What did we do? We talked about my ace yesterday from disc golf. We talked about the April Andrews poll. We talked about my speaking stuff in colleges coming up. Andrea Bowman, Austin Pivo. Next Friday, Crystal Morrison, In Memoriam, KETK. Mention giving a link to the Kimberly Norwood episode. We talked about Molly Miller, Colt Haynes, and the show on Oxygen, whether it was good or not. I did treaded lightly on the topic of the coronavirus. Talked about the Boston Transit Authority, talking about how they're going through their most non-violent era of their existence. Talked about Harvey Weinstein. Took questions from Antonia, Lisa, Tanya, and Talia. And like always, I finished up with this coming Friday's case, and that is David Hardy Jr. From Alexandria, Louisiana, July 2017. That's it. I'm going to say goodnight. An hour and 40 minutes again. To my knowledge, I'm the only podcast host out there that does this. Does a show and then does a live show as well, so I can interact with at least some of the listeners. I love doing it. Only person who does that. Weekly. Love it. I don't know why more people hosts don't do it. I don't know what to tell you. But I'm going to leave you now. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. Great show. Thank you for all the questions, comments, everything. Good night.